That painting is country trash, and it's not going anywhere near my new walls. My daughter-in-law said it loudly enough for the whole room to hear, and my granddaughter, 9 years old, standing 7 feet away, pretending to look at her phone, heard every word. Her shoulders went rigid. She didn't look up. She already knew what the painting was, because she'd watched her grandmother paint it. I said nothing. I crossed the living room of my son's new house, stepped past the contractor and the tile samples, and the mood boards pinned to a foam board, and I picked up the canvas where the movers had propped it against the baseboard. 3 feet wide, maybe 2.5 tall, a lake at early morning, the water flat and gray-green, the tree line just beginning to catch the light. My wife had sat on that dock for 3 mornings straight to get the light right. I'd brought her coffee each time, and she'd barely looked up. My daughter-in-law had already turned back to the contractor. They were discussing grout color. "What are you doing with that?" my son asked from across the room. "Taking it home." He opened his mouth, then closed it. His wife glanced over her shoulder. "Don't be sentimental, Dad. We don't have room for it here. And honestly, neither do you. Just let it go with the donation boxes." I carried the painting to my car, wrapped it in the emergency blanket I keep in the trunk, and set it on the back seat. My granddaughter appeared at my window before I could start the engine. She'd slipped out without anyone noticing. "Grandpa," her voice was barely above a whisper, "Grandma painted that for me. She told me she did." "I know, sweetheart. Don't let them throw it away." "I won't." Her grandmother's eyes dark brown and watchful. "I promise." I drove home with the painting on the back seat and the radio off. My wife's name was Clarice, and I'll tell it because she deserves to be named. We were married 41 years. She was a hospice nurse for 34 of those years and a painter for all of them. Though most people knew only one of those things about her, she moved between the two the way some people can sleep anywhere. She'd come home from a 12-hour shift and be standing at the easel an hour later, a cup of tea on the windowsill, painting like she'd just gotten up from a long rest. I'm 67, retired high school history teacher, the kind of man who notices things late, or so my wife would say, but remembers them clearly once he does. Clarice was diagnosed 14 months before she died. We had time, which is both a blessing and a particular kind of cruelty. She used that time the way she used everything, carefully, with purpose. 6 weeks before the end, when she was still lucid but her voice had gone thin, she told me, "That painting at the lake, the big one, don't let it go to just anyone. It's for our girl. And before you do anything else, take it to Vance. Don't look alone, go to Vance first." I assumed she meant some kind of inscription. She was always leaving small notes in places, tucked inside books, taped behind cabinet doors. It was one of her habits. Vance is my oldest friend. We met in 1987 at a county auction, both bidding on the same roll-top desk. He won. We've been close ever since. He spent 40 years as an art dealer and estate appraiser before his knees and his patience for difficult clients gave out around the same time. He's 71 now, and he has the best eye for a painting of anyone I've ever known. When Clarice had questions about a piece, she always called Vance. I called him the morning after the housewarming. He came to my house to see it in natural light. He stood in front of it for a long time without speaking. Then he put on his reading glasses and crouched to examine the lower right corner. He made a sound I'd never heard from him before, something between a breath and a word that didn't quite form. "Vance." "Give me a minute." He turned the painting very carefully and examined the back. The stretcher bars, the canvas where it folded over the wood. He ran a finger along the inside edge and stopped. "Sit down." "I'm fine standing." "Sit down anyway." I sat. He worked his finger gently into the fold on one of the stretcher bars and found a small envelope taped flat against the wood, the kind used for greeting cards, sealed with red wax, my name written on the front in Clarice's handwriting. On the opposite stretcher bar, taped with the same careful precision, was a folded document inside a clear plastic sleeve. He handed me the envelope first. The wax seal had her thumbprint pressed into it. I broke it carefully. Her handwriting. "Gus, if you're reading this, you kept your promise. I knew you would. In the plastic sleeve is a trust document filed downtown. I set aside $310,000 for our granddaughter. Her education, her start in life, whatever she needs most. The money came from paintings I sold over the past 12 years under my maiden name. I never told you because I wanted it to be entirely hers, untouched by anyone else. The originals are with the attorney. Our girl is the sole beneficiary, not our son, not his wife, our girl, all my love. See? I read it 3 times. Vance. My voice came from somewhere unfamiliar. The paintings she sold, under her maiden name, what do they go for? He was already on his phone. He typed, waited, typed again. The expression that moved across his face was one I couldn't read at first. Then I recognized it. It was the face of a man recalibrating. Gus, he turned the screen toward me. A gallery website, a landscape I recognized immediately. Our yard in April, the dogwood in full bloom. Listed price $22,000. That's our front yard. There are 11 paintings attributed to Clarice Devane in private collections. 3 more in a regional museum in Asheville. She's been written about in 2 art journals. He nodded at the canvas leaning against my couch. This painting was shown privately at a collector's home in 2019. It was described in writing as a masterwork of American regional landscape painting. He paused. Conservative estimate on value right now is $160,000 to $210,000. I held onto the arm of my chair. She never said a word. She said plenty. Vance touched the corner of the envelope gently. She just set it in paint. My son had tried to send a painting worth $200,000 to a dumpster. He'd done it in front of his daughter, in front of me, because it didn't match the grout color he was choosing for his new accent wall. And behind that painting was a trust worth $310,000 that he didn't know existed. I sat with that for a while, then I called my attorney. Felicity has handled estate work in our county for 26 years. She's methodical in a way that always reminded me of Clarice's approach to painting. She doesn't rush. She gets everything right before she proceeds. She looked at the document from the stretcher bar and Clarice's letter, then made 2 phone calls. The trust was real, filed correctly, notarized properly, our granddaughter named as sole beneficiary. The trustee was me. This is airtight, she said. She set her pen down. Your son has no legal claim to this trust. It was funded by your wife's separate earnings and registered independently. He cannot touch it. He doesn't know it exists. Good. Let's keep it that way until we're ready. She looked at her notes. There's something else. You mentioned your son has been pressuring you to sign a property transfer. I had mentioned it 3 weeks earlier. My son had been pushing me for months to sign over a small rental property Clarice and I had owned together. 4 units, nothing grand, claiming I was too old to manage tenants responsibly, that it was a liability at my age. He'd had a transfer document drawn up. I hadn't signed it. Current market value on that property? Felicity asked. Around $340,000. She wrote it down. The way this transfer document is written, it conveys the property entirely to your son and his wife. Your granddaughter is cut out of any inheritance chain. Completely. She met my eyes. Your wife built protections. I think she saw exactly this kind of pressure coming. I thought about Clarice in the hospital bed, still sharp, still planning, pressing her thumbprint into wax when her hands were already giving her trouble. She'd known. She'd seen what my son was becoming before I let myself see it clearly. My son called that same evening. Dad, the careful voice, the one he used when he wanted something, about the painting. What about it? It belonged to Mom, which means it belongs to the estate. You can't just take it. Your mother specifically asked me to keep it safe. I have that in writing. A pause. What does that mean? It means I kept a promise. You're not making sense. The careful quality dropped out of his voice. You're 67 years old. You live alone. You drove out here to take a painting off our wall. My wife and I have been talking about whether you need someone checking in on you regularly, professionally. It might be time to look at that. He said it gently. He'd perfected the gentle version of a threat. I appreciate your concern, I said. I'll be in touch. I hung up. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me a little. A few weeks later, Vance called me with something else. He'd been working a hunch, tracing auction records. 9 months after Clarice died, My son had arranged an estate sale at the old house and cleared out her attic without telling me the specific pieces. 23 of her canvases. He'd sold them for between $40 and $200 each. One, a winter scene of our front porch, went to a private buyer for $800. That buyer resold it through an auction house 6 months later. Final price, $31,000. My son had sold 23 of Clarice's paintings for a combined total of roughly $2,600. I met him for coffee on a Thursday morning and put Vance's documentation on the table between us. The sale records, the auction result, the photograph of the porch painting. He looked at it for a long time. "I didn't know they were worth anything," he said. "You could have asked me. You could have asked anyone. Mom painted as a hobby. I didn't think. Your mother was a documented artist. She'd been written about. Her work is in museums. I didn't know that. He wasn't looking at me. I would have done it differently. I believed he might even mean it. That was almost the worst part. I believed he might genuinely mean it, and it still didn't change what had happened. There's something else," I said. "Something your mother left behind. I want you to hear it from me before you hear it from an attorney." I told him about the trust, the $310,000, his daughter's name on every document, his mother's letter sealed with a thumbprint behind the painting he'd told me to send to the dumpster. He went still for a moment. Then something moved across his face that wasn't guilt exactly. I recognized it as calculation. He was doing arithmetic. "That money needs proper management," he said. "A 9-year-old can't. I'm the trustee. Your mother named me. Your daughter receives the funds when she turns 21, with provisions for education before then. You're 67. I know. If something happened to you, the successor trustee is already named. It's not you." He set down his coffee cup. The restaurant sounds around us were too cheerful for the conversation. "I want to contest the trust," he said. "I'll need to speak with my own attorney." I looked at my son across that table, 44 years old, in a jacket that cost more than I used to earn in a week, and I thought about the Saturday morning I taught him to ride a bike in an empty parking lot, both of us laughing when he finally got it. About the emergency room when he was 16 and broke his arm on a skateboard, and he'd been embarrassed about crying, and I'd told him crying was the correct response to pain. About the phone call I made to him when his mother died, because I knew he needed to hear it from me. Somewhere in the years between that Saturday morning and this Thursday coffee, he'd become someone his mother had needed to build legal protections against. "Speak with whoever you like," I said. "My attorney is prepared." I left first. The legal proceedings took 11 weeks. My son's attorney filed 2 motions. Felicity had anticipated both. The trust held without modification. At a preliminary hearing, his attorney argued that my mental fitness warranted evaluation, that a 67-year-old man living alone, retrieving paintings, and making decisions about 6-figure trusts should have his judgment examined. The judge looked at the filing and then looked at me and asked my attorney if she had competency documentation. Felicity submitted 3 years of clean financial records, a letter from my physician, a deposition from Vance describing our professional collaboration over 35 years, and a letter from my granddaughter's school principal noting my consistent and engaged presence in my granddaughter's education. The motion was denied in the same session. My son did not pursue the contest past that point. His own attorney, I was told later, had advised him that the documentation was too solid and that fighting his deceased mother's clearly stated wishes, publicly, in court, was not a battle survivable for a man who still needed to do business in this county. He signed the acknowledgement in February. The painting hangs in my living room now, on the wall opposite the front door. It's the first thing you see when you walk in. The lake at early morning, the water flat and gray-green, the tree line just beginning to catch the first light. Clarice got something right about that light that I couldn't explain if someone asked me to. She always got the thing that's hardest to get, which is the feeling of a moment rather than just the look of it. My granddaughter comes over every Tuesday after school. It's become a routine we didn't plan out. It just accumulated the way the best routines do. She does homework at the kitchen table. I make dinner, which isn't much, but she's kind about it. Afterward, she sometimes stands in front of the painting for a minute or two, without saying anything, not every time, but some. She said to me once, a few months into this arrangement, "Grandma knew we'd need it, didn't she?" She did. She probably knew before she was even sick. I thought about the envelope pressed flat against the stretcher bar, the thumbprint in red wax. Probably, I said. My granddaughter looked at the painting another moment. "I want to learn how to paint," she said. "Not because of anything, just because." She looked at me sideways. "Is that weird?" "That's the least weird thing I've heard all year." She laughed. It sounded like something loosening. Clarice would have had a brush in her hand within 30 seconds. She wouldn't have waited for the right supplies or the right lesson. She would have said, "Start somewhere, we'll fix it as we go." That was always her way. I bought my granddaughter a beginner's set of oil paints the following week. Nothing expensive, just enough to start somewhere. She painted something at my kitchen table that I couldn't fully identify, but that she described as the backyard, but more interesting, and she signed it in careful letters in the bottom right corner. She asked if she could leave it here. I said of course. It hangs in the kitchen now, next to a photograph of Clarice from 20 years ago, standing at the lake with a streak of paint on her forearm that she hadn't noticed. The light in both pictures is almost exactly the same. What we protect says everything about what we value. My son looked at his mother's painting and saw something in the way of what he wanted. Clarice looked at that same canvas for 3 mornings in a row and saw the whole world she'd built, the water, the light, the quiet of a place where nothing had gone wrong yet. She put all of it down in paint. She sealed an envelope with her thumbprint. She trusted that someone would go looking. I kept my promise. Our granddaughter is provided for. The painting is on the wall where it belongs. Some things deserve to be rescued. Some things deserve the wall they were made for. I'm glad I went back for it.